Good morning, this is Heather Hoffman, and I've got a fun technique to show you today to stamp with Distress Oxide inks on colored cardstock. I'm using the June 2019 Kit of the Month one more time here, and I'm using that lovely large Celebrate Focal Point sentiment stamp. And I'm going to line this up, and I'm using some soft blue cardstock, and you can use just about any color of cardstock. The darker it is, the different it'll show up, but I've picked a trio of Distress Oxide inks. I'm lining this all up in my MISTI, and I'm going to start by stamping with some white pigment ink. I'm also going to do some heat embossing, so before I did that, I really quickly went over that with my powder tool, just to get the anti-static effect on there. But I'm starting off by stamping that image once with the white pigment ink. This is Hero Art's Unicorn White, and you notice that just kind of sets a base down on that colored cardstock. Now I'm coming over with one of my Distress Oxide inks, and any kind of other, pigments work really well for this. This one color that I'm using here is Abandoned Coral, and I don't know if you can see how lovely that pops right over the white. The white kind of helps provide a little bit of a base for that color to stamp on. And then once I've stamped all of that on, I'm going to stamp over it one more time with clear embossing ink. So I'm stamping several times over the top, starting with the white pigment ink, then adding my Distress Oxide, usually stamping 2 or 3 times with that to make sure and get lots of color on there, and then stamping over the top with that clear embossing ink. And when I'm all done, I'm going to sprinkle some clear embossing powder on there that has some glitter in it, so it's going to add some great sparkle and fun as well. Alright, the second color I'm using is Dried Marigold, and again, inking it up, stamping it a couple times to make sure I got a really good clear impression and that all of it's well inked and well colored on that colored cardstock. And also make sure and clean the stamp between each of those, mostly because you don't want to get ink on your clear embossing or your white pigment ink. You don't want those colors to bleed over between the two. Alright, gonna add that last Celebrate. I love using a focal point sentiment like this several times on a card as well. It just kind of helps reinforce just that main word, that Celebrate. It fills the card front, and it kind of makes the point of what you're trying to drive home with your card. Alright, this final color I'm stamping with is called Tattered Rose. It's a great soft pink color. I just thought these colors were so fun together, especially paired over that soft blue background. Alright, final cleaning of the stamp, and one more time to stamp over the top with that clear embossing ink. And then I'm also going to add one additional tiny sentiment underneath that's also from the same kit. I'm going to stamp this with some black pigment ink, which also will work well for embossing. I don't need to add the extra embossing ink because this one is VersaFine Onyx Black, and it will grab that embossing powder on its own. Alright, this is a Wow clear sparkly glitter embossing powder. I'm going to sprinkle a really good solid coat over the top, making sure everything's covered. Some of that middle one, the ink's dried a tiny bit more, so I made sure to put an extra heavy coat over that as well. Then I'm quickly going to set this with my heat gun real fast, and you'll be able to see as it melts, and it adds that sparkle and shine, and also just kind of sets all of that color over the top. Since there's so many layers of pigment ink, it would take a while to set it aside and let it dry without smudging it with your fingers. And so by doing this, I'm sealing over the top of it with that clear embossing powder. We're adding great sparkle and shine, and it finishes off the card really quickly right away. So kind of hard to see all that sparkle in there, but it's super fun. And then as one final finishing touch, it just felt like it needed a little something to finish it off. I'm adding some white paint splatters. This is just white acrylic paint that I've mixed with water, and I keep in a little bottle. You could mix a little bit on a palette and use a paintbrush to add those splatters on as well. And there we go, a fun card, simple one layer and easy to pop in the mail. Thanks so much for coming by today. I hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day.